Now got some panel line and pre-shade rusting on the Cromwell, so went over with the dark rust. So well, basically, yeah, got the dark rust as a general one just to go over. Then basically going over the panel lines. Then I wanted to use some black for the tyres, the road wheels, so obviously put the black on there. But I'd done that whilst I had that a bit of that left in, and then mix the two together just to go over and just add a little bit more variation. So as you can see, some of that rusting is darker in other areas, so it kind of adds that sort of pre-shading that you tend to have with aeroplane when you're sort of putting it over the panel lines. But what I'm thinking is where chips and things are going to be happening is actually going to be on those panel joins as well. So I thought, two birds with one stone, get that on there, so it just adds a little bit of a variety to it. So the idea now is to spray some water over this. That will make it wet, and then sprinkle salt over. Now I've got the two types of salts. Remember we did that experiment just on the inside pit, which isn't actually going to really be visible, but it gave us an idea. So I've got in here just some regular table salt, so that's quite fine grains, and I do also have some sea salt flakes there, which is a lot larger. So the idea is to try to use some of the larger chunks where we're going to have more of the heavier chipping, and then a few little sprinkles, and try to keep it around the sort of hatches, the sort of bits where there would actually be chips and be getting a bit of rust. We're not going to be going for a full-on rusted effect completely on there, but if we can get a bit of that on there before putting the green down, that should work. So it's just going to be a case of spraying some water, and in the airbrush I've literally just got a bit of tap water. There we go, absolutely soaked it. Now, if we try to come in a bit more, you can see absolutely soaking wet. We'll take the larger grains first of all. Let's see if we can actually try to sprinkle these along the panel lines. Got far too much in my hand there. You can see the grains are, you do have some quite large grains in there, but we do need to be broken up a touch. I just want to make sure that I do keep these along the panel lines, because otherwise if they go onto the parts where there's not the rusting effect already painted on, when it comes off it will just chip it down to bare plastic. It does take a while, but it's this salt slowly will start soaking up the water, so you need quite a bit of water on there, I've found. See, I'm just using a brush just to manipulate it into the areas that I want to keep it in. Obviously, you want to have a random nature to it as well. So you've got like a massive chunk of salt there. So just crumble that up a bit. especially along that front. Trying to get in little gaps as well. You actually have a salt pyramid. So just a little diamond-shaped salt granule. Just put a little bit of that. Okay, now I did find with this it's quite fine, but this does actually give a bit of texture to it because the finer salt doesn't always come off so well, but it did kind of leave a bit of a graininess to it, which was actually quite a nice. So I'm just doing this very liberally, this one. Now before we flip it over, we'll wait for that to dry, but you can see obviously it's still shiny there, and you can see those larger crystals. And what should happen is as that sort of starts drying, that will sort of, as it soaks up the water, it should sort of bond it on a little bit, but we'll wait for that to dry before we flip it over and start doing the sides and the bottom. So I think we are about there with that. I'm going to leave that. So we got salt on there. You can see the larger grains are still white, and salt on there. And we've gone possibly a bit to town, but as this dries, some of it will inevitably get knocked off before we even have a chance to get the airbrush on it anyway. So I have gone a little bit OTT with it, a bit over the top. However, I'm pretty sure that by the time it's done, you can see it's actually already started to absorb. It kind of goes clear, and then once it dries, it'll go white again, and then you can really see where we've got it. Now we've got the salt on and the water's dry, it's sort of recrystallised. So what sort of happens, actually let's come in a bit tighter there, is when it was absolutely soaking wet, you sprinkle the salt on, it's obviously you can see where it goes, but then as you leave it, it absorbs the water and kind of goes clear. And then it sort of dries, but then overnight, what will happen is the water sort of evaporates back out to the salt, leaving it stuck to the surface. I mean, if I were to rub it, it comes off quite easily. And talking of rubbing it, what I have done is there's a few areas where basically the rust hadn't gone on, so they made all the panels. So what I've been doing is just with a brush, just making sure, brushing over, taking off some of the excess where I definitely don't want bits of rust to be chipping through. So if there are little bits, then of course during the course of the weathering that will sort of be covered, but if we can ease that around the sides, it's been a lot more on there, so it's a bit more random. And on the bottom, have been putting it over where the sort of hatches are, and that's where some of the darker rust patches are. So we've got a bit of variation on there. And like with the turret, mainly it's around where the hatches are, where people would be climbing over, chipping off paint, and therefore once the paint is chipped, then that's going to be taking it down to the metal, which of course will show the rust. I haven't really got any on the barrel or those sort of things. So that's the idea. Oh, and with the wheels, course got salt over the hubcaps on there. So now is to get painting all of them, and for that we're going to be using the MRP SCC number 15 olive drab. And this is basically what pretty much every British Second World War armour had, and it's literally just all over. This is MRP 349. So give it a bit more of a shake, and we'll just spray this over the turret, over the main chassis on here, and on the wheels. Now I've got to admit, I did wait, not overnight, but literally a couple of minutes after I finished clearing up the airbrush. I thought, well, actually some of the paint on the wheels and the other bits are done, so I just wanted to check how they were, and for that I actually started trying to use a little brush, but I found actually an old toothbrush was quite good for scrubbing away, and actually the result isn't too bad actually, because this does dry quite quick. I know that's a little bit out of focus, but you can see obviously the patchy bits where there was some black bits, a bit of rust actually on the central hubcap. It's not massively obvious. I mean, there's some good sort of bits on here where there's just a few little rust like patches, just like some of that paint's flaked away, but not over the top. Not as mucky as what it was when we were experimenting with it. And so I realise I do need to paint the bottom parts, so I know I will be getting the green out again, and I can do any touching up if needs be. But you can see already started there, giving it a rub over, and so now you can see there's a few little brown marks there, just on the hubcaps and where those bits of salt were. And actually on the wheels, I did let some of the black overspray as well when I was actually painting the tyres, just so then I thought, well, the wheels are probably going to be a bit darker as well. But yeah, you can see you've got a little rust patch on there, so it's actually quite a good effect. Now one of the reasons I was not waiting for it to dry too much is I did find before is that the salt obviously absorbs water, but it also absorbs the lacquer from the paint. So I thought I'd better not leave it too long, and in fact that's actually starting to take it a little bit, where it's actually taking some of the paint pretty much off of the it's basically sucking the paint off of the surface a bit. So I thought I don't want to leave it too long, but it does also give a more of a textured and pitted look to it, especially with the smaller grains. So there we go. doing each of those, and mainly I focused on the hubcap, those central sort of sections for the rust. And of course we will, you know, be rusting up and doing it properly, but actually that's quite a nice sort of basis for it. So you might as well do each of these. Actually that one didn't have too much salt on at all, so that's quite a nice clean one, just a little hint here and there. And you do want to do it over a bit of paper, just to make it a lot easier to clean your mess up afterwards. And some of these, they've not gone completely smooth, there is still a bit of texture to it, but that is fine, it kind of gives it a bit of a textured, not completely smooth surface. So that is still looking, that's still looking a little bit shiny. And we're looking on here, that is also, actually that's not so bad. So also, well, the pre-shading, because I also not only done it as rust but as pre-shading, hopefully you can see, I know it's still catching the light a bit there, but we are starting, it's not just solid green. You can see there is sort of texture a little bit to it, a bit of pre-shading, darker in certain places. So even if the rusting didn't work at all, we've still got a bit of a pre-shading effect. But you can really see, as I'm doing that, I'm getting a lot more rust suddenly coming through there. Now it probably looks a little bit odd because of course the paint is pristine at the moment. We've got this nice glossy finish on the green and then the rust sort of coming through, which is a bit of like the extremes, but naturally once we get the weathering on, it'll kind of tie those extremes together. So it'll tone down the newness of that green. I think that is actually giving quite a nice, for a starter to get going. I was going to say I'm actually quite pleased with how that's actually coming out. Probably sounds quite vicious, but it is actually quite a hard toothbrush. It's definitely still got a bit of scrub left in it. But the different, I can sort of see some of these patches are darker, some of these are more lighter rust, some of them are more darker patches here and there. So it's not just a standard cut, it's not just a standard rust colour under there. We have got some variation. I know bits were cut off, bits of salt were coming off as I was doing this. And we did have a blob of paint come out as well, which actually I'm going to have to be touching up separately. On that main sort of deck, yeah, just there was a blob of paint, so I'll have to do something about that anyway. And actually, yeah, we got a nice bit of rusting where water would be kicking up, but quite a lot of that's going to be hidden, but I'm actually pleased with how that looks, and a few darker patches of it as well. So it's not just one tone, and kind of got a bit of texture, but not as much as when we were experimenting for those bits which were hidden away in there. Need to just do a few little bits there. Actually, we're now catching the lights, and actually that has worked quite nicely in here. I just where those bits of photo etch were, tried to put more on this side, whereas in the water would run down, the water would sort of sit behind those bars. But of course rust it up a bit more. I just knocked that gun, but that's fine as long as I don't move it anymore. We should be fine. So, made a bit of a mess here. Popping that just in place there, just to get a bit of an idea. It's definitely got a bit of rusting going on to that, breaking up just so it's not just one slab of, basically one just big slab of olive drab. And I think actually that's going to give us a really good base to get more weathering and everything done on. So really pleased with how that went, and that actually, you know, doing the panel lines, the pre-shading and the chipping all in one with just a bit of salt that was in the cupboard, that I'm going to say I am pleased with. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe to see how this carries on. If you like it, please do like it. If you don't like it, then please let me know. Put a message in the comments just so I know, so for future builds I can try to make sure that I tailor these videos to what you want and what you want to see. I've been Rob, thanks for watching Rob's Models, happy modelling and see you soon.